It's in. Let's get rolling. Welcome everybody. This is the Meshery CI call. So CI continuous integration. A number of you have been on calls previously, and some of you, actually, I'm not sure if any of you had. Yeah, no, McCool maybe had been on this particular series of calls that we had in the past. You can see in the meeting minutes that we had met. Well, gosh, a while ago, a number of months ago, we had been consistently had topics and can work in this area. And that work stream had sort of concluded at the time, but it's kicking back up where Meshery as a project has a lot of components. Each of those components get built. Each of them have their own version numbers. Each of them need to do, integration testing, be released, be compiled, be, all of these continuous integration concerns. And so there's a lot to do. And there's enough folks here who are interested. So we're picking back up the meeting. So hopefully this time works for those that are interested. We're gonna give it a shot. One of the reasons that we're able to pick this back up is because Rodolfo has joined the community in force, so to speak, since last we'd met. So Rodolfo had been around the community for some time, and then has more, in the last number of months had been more recently actively contributing. We can't scare the guy away, so we're gonna embrace, and he's been doing fantastic work. As a matter of fact, if you were on this last Friday's community meeting, you will have remembered that we had announced we make a few community announcements generally in those calls on Fridays. And the last one was that Rodolfo is now a maintainer. And it's not an easy level necessarily to get to. There's a little bit of some sweat, maybe some blood and sweat, I'm not sure. But part of that, he's shown a real aptitude toward this particular area of topics. And for my part, I am almost entirely tapped out. Lots of work streams going on, and so without so it's not a platitude, and it's not me blowing smoke up Rodolfo's skirt, so to speak, if I can use some of those. But that's to say that I'm glad that he's here. I'm glad that he's stepping up to lead this group. I anticipate people will hear my voice, but perhaps not as much as they will hear his. And for the rest of you that get involved, we will hear yours. So I know it doesn't seem like it because it's been 3 minutes of me talking, but part of my goal here is to help provide some goals or some vision, but to help provide some support and be here in a supporting fashion as the collection of you and Rodolfo go and lay waste to a number of things. So good. So with that, I think most of you, or all of you, including Raphael, have been on calls before, and so you're all fairly familiar with sort of the routine, so to speak. So if you're here, toss your name into the meeting minutes. It's nice to record the folks that have joined in. And then if you've got topics, please toss them in down below, and we'll start going. It just so happens that this first one is me, but we don't need to touch on that one first. I don't need to speak any more than I have. I'll be quiet and say, Rodolfo, thanks for getting this going again. Thanks for choosing a time, getting us organized. So do you want to tell folks about what we've got? Meeting minutes here. We've got a weekly recurring meeting, a Slack channel.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for everyone to attend to this new CI meeting. Here we are trying to improve our CI tests in all the projects of layer 5. So the first thing that I want to talk about is about the Meshery integration with Kubernetes. We started to implement some front-end tests with Cypress. If you want to contribute with that, there is a blog post and a video meeting talking about Cypress and created end-to-end tests with Cypress. Also, last week we submit a form to have Cypress dashboard in order to have that dashboard in our open source project. If you see this pull request, you will see that there is a new commit message from Cypress telling us how many tests are passed and how many tests fail. Right now, we only have 3 users, and once Cypress allows about the open source plan, we have 5 users. But right now, we only have 3 users. But if you are having trouble with Cypress tests, please let us know in order to debug that test, those tests. Only to see how it works. If some tests are failing, maybe this one, you will see that this test is failing, and you can see like a video of what is missing or why is failing. So this is the error in a real browser. Also, if you see below this, you will see the error on when or where is failing the test. This is very helpful in order to debug test. But if you need this, please let us know. Send a message to Lee or to me in order to debug this test.
Encrypted or clear text?
Uh-huh.
Encrypted or clear text? Which one?
Which one?
Encrypted message or clear text message? GPG encrypted or clear text message, which is not encrypted. Which one? How can I send message to you? I mean,
How to send message? You can
yes,
contact us with through using Slack.
Slack. Okay.
Yeah. For example, if you submit a pull request that is failing, and you don't know why, you can send us a Slack message to see the screenshots or the video about that test.
Okay.
Anyone has a question about this topic of Cypress dashboard?
Rodolfo, yeah, I guess you were just showing this, but there's some amount of, there's basically a test summary that gets appended each time that a PR is run that implicates Cypress tests. It sounds like, for some of the pull requests that would come through, there may not be Cypress tests that are invoked, like, for example, the docs. So I guess it's the case that if someone doesn't see a test summary on their PR, if they've just done documentation, then they're okay. Like you wouldn't have those checks, and so.
Right. Good annotationally, because, for example, in this pull request, I don't modifying the docs, so the docs workflow doesn't or didn't trigger that.
Gotcha. And then I guess I haven't, so I'm a complete newbie to the Cypress UI dashboard, like the thing you can go sign into and look at. But at least initially of what you're showing, like I guess we will see as we use it. I was just trying to think like, hey, so you were just saying we're signed up for the open source program plan. And right now that's constrained to like 3 accounts, which means like the vast majority of us wouldn't go in and necessarily have access. We'll get a test summary that we're seeing now. To the extent that there are failures within there, it sounds like that might be, some of those details might only be within here, but maybe time will tell as we go to use it, just how many of those details are exposed.
Yeah, in that case that some test is failing, it will take a screenshot and it will post it here in GitHub.
Nice.
So that screenshot is available for everyone and it will say something of why it's failing.
Nice. Oh, okay. Then good. Then hopefully that's not a hindrance to anyone. I mean, that's great.
Now, how many users can we have in the CI organization?
Only 5 for the open source plan.
Oh, yes, I remember. Okay. Unlimited test recording and support by community. Do we have a contact with the community? CI community, Cypress community?
Yep. There's a not really. I mean, we just recently signed up this week, and so they don't really know us special than anything else. We've Rodolfo has ensured that we have sent in an application to be classified as under the open source plan. I'm not sure if that gets additional. Oh, okay. Yeah, Rodolfo, you just said this. So right now we're constrained to 3, but assuming that we're approved under the open source plan, we'll have a total of 5. Well, that's great.
Can I
Right.
join the community plan?
Mert, I don't know that we could understand you.
Do you
Can I join
mean
the
this community
CI?
support?
No, not the Cypress community. Our CI integration panel, where we test the Cypress, the integration with Cypress.
Yeah, we already have that integration in our project.
How
I
can
don't know
I
if
run it? I mean, I want to log into the dashboard like you. I mean that.
yeah, at the moment you can not log into the Cypress dashboard at the moment.
What do I need for that?
Only we have 3 users for the free plan and later on 5 users. But if you have problems with one test, please let us know in order to check those tests, but using our personal user.
Okay, for a quick solution, I should send you a message.
Yep,
Okay.
at the moment. Maybe we can change that in the future, but for now,
Okay.
that is how it's working now.
Okay. No problem.
So continue with the other topic. Lee just post this blog and presentation for how to integrate tests with Cypress. So you can take a look of that. Also, we already signed for the OS plan, like Lee said. So we are done for that. We are waiting for the response. And do you want to return for the first topic, Lee, now? To talk about build and release strategy?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's maybe a good way of introducing a few things to folks. So I know some of you are familiar with, well, you're familiar with the build process that goes on today, or sort of all of the concerns that come into account today. But given that we're kicking this up fresh again, and some of you aren't familiar, it probably serves us all very well to do kind of a quick tour of what our build and release strategy is, sort of overall. I was going to check real quick, so we've got good got right folks on. One thing, yeah, I will highlight is that, so Rodolfo just pointed out the blog post and presentation that he had given before. Cypress is a pretty neat tool. It's something that Rodolfo had suggested earlier and gotten us started with, and it's helping boost our confidence as we go to make a release that like things are actually working. And it's not just unit tests, those are great, but the end-to-end integration tests, these functional tests, oh, it's so much better. It like mimicking being a user really helps. So Cypress is the tool that's been chosen to be used. And we're integrating it a bit further, like Rodolfo was showing. I know that if you're like me, you've not really used, maybe you've done integration testing with different tools, but maybe not Cypress. And so the presentation and the blog post that Rodolfo did are really helpful in that regard. There's some best practices in there, because eventually anyone who's contributing in the community, they are likely to be asked to create an integration test. And so there'll be a lot of prior art, and there are integration tests that are included today as examples. But yeah, so there's a record. I think Rodolfo presented that at a previous meeting. If there isn't a link to it, I think there's probably a link to it in the blog post maybe, but just ask if you want to watch the recording. So then back on on our overall build and release strategy, I have probably confused two things. So there's actually there are two docs here. There is the Meshery build and release strategy, which I'm going to put in a different link. And then there's the Meshery Cloud build and release strategy, which is, do they sound really similar? They're fairly similar. We're going to talk about Meshery build and release strategy a bit, but I'll note that so Meshery Cloud is, let's describe that separately, because I think it will confuse some of us if we dig into that right now. So I'm putting the link to Meshery build and release strategy. So little known fact so Rodolfo, if you don't mind sharing that, we'll kind of give people a quick tour and talk about maybe some of the goals that we would do. And yeah, actually, I meant if you don't mind sharing, but let me do it real quick here. So do click into here. This is fairly well written. It needs a couple of updates. When we first started Meshery, it's a little over a year ago. And you can see actually when we first started Meshery and when we first started making releases, you can see that inside of Meshery's, well, you can go to GitHub, you can go to Meshery's documentation, you can go to the releases section, and sort of scroll back in time to when things were initiated. I think you'll see commits in the GitHub repo a number of months earlier than this. We just didn't get around to making a release. And so anyway, so the project's been around for a while. The first continuous integration system that was used, I think there was initially some Circle CI, and we looked at Travis CI a little bit. It seemed to be like you'd get a little bit more as an open source project. And then GitHub Actions were announced, sometime in this area, last year, or that year rather. Yeah, I guess it's 2 years ago now. And so we switched into GitHub Actions and been using workflows, and we've been, collectively as a community, has been learned about what those actions are and how to use them, how much we can use them, all the things that you can get done inside there. And so we'll do a quick tour of those workflows, because they're quite important to what all is described here. But it's worth noting that Meshery itself, it's comprised of a number of components. And so the deal is not all of those components are have the same version number. So if you've ever looked out at Meshery and you've looked at its architecture a little bit, The most notable components to Meshery's architecture are Meshery, the server, and then Meshery adapters. If you deploy Meshery today, those are kind of the components that you'll see. The reality is there's any number of other smaller logical components that can be released independently. And so Meshery CTL is a smaller component. It's the command line client. That the code base for Meshery CTL is inside of the Meshery repository. Meshery UI is another client, and the code base for it's React.js and it's Next.js and React. That code base is also in the Meshery repo, but these are individual components, and they some of these carry different release numbers, like the adapters, they carry their own release numbers, and some don't. And because there's like 40 something repositories and there's a lot going on, and Meshery's Meshery as a project has a large vision. These independent components get released and versioned at different rates. And so there's a doc here that talks about upgrading Meshery, and just a quick visual to show you that the command line client is its own binary. It's written in Go and compiles to a single static binary. So it gets, because it's in the same Meshery repo as Meshery server, it gets versioned, it's always versioned this and released the same with Meshery server, because the same workflow, the same build process builds them at the same time. So that's nice. The adapters are, each of the Meshery adapters, they're in different repositories. They are versioned independently because they're not all, there isn't a global master build process that goes out to all the repos and invokes like parallel builds to create all the components at the same time and build them. Like, that doesn't happen, and it's not intended to happen. It's intended that Istio as a service mesh, for example, will make its releases every so often, and that Meshery adapter for Istio, it needs to try to keep pace. And so that pace is going to be different from Meshery server and Meshery UI and all these components. Like, we're not trying to master orchestrate that they're all built and released all at the exact same time. Rather, that's what microservices are about. Like, rather we have different community members showing up at different times to do different things. And so we want to empower them and be able to make and build and release things independently. And so that's kind of the backstory as to why there's a number of components, different versions of those things. There's a consideration for, as a user goes to upgrade, what do they need to watch out for, and how are those things versioned? That's not what we're trying to talk about today, but I wanted to point that out because it's important with respect to the fact that as a workflow executes, there can be any number of artifacts to come out of that build. And those artifacts generally are like, one-to-one. There's generally, if you've got a Meshery component, like Meshery server, there's an artifact for that. If you've got a Meshery CTL as a command line client, there's an artifact for that. And so in general, the vast majority of the artifacts that are built, they're either, the output of them is, much of the output of the builds is either a Docker image. So Meshery server is compiled and created inside of a Docker image. It's pushed to Docker Hub. So the artifact repo there is Docker Hub. And that's the same thing for the adapters as well. As Docker Hub is used to hold those. Meshery CTL is, it's actually kept inside of the Meshery repo. So if you go out to the Meshery repo and look at all the releases, if you go to a specific release, you'll find that what happens as when a release is made and the workflows are run and the build occurs, that the individual entry for that release is updated with assets that were built. And in this case, the only assets that are deposited here is the command line client, Meshery CTL. I guess I shouldn't say that. Like, technically, I think the entire repo is tar-gz'd and available, but it doesn't really matter. For users, it's Meshery CTL.
Sorry, can I ask a question about the checksum t- file, TXT file. If we can make, or I can make maybe a separate checksum file per architecture, like AMD 64 and ARM, ARM,
Yeah.
separate files. Each file single checksum for single architecture. Is it acceptable, or is it a
Let's see. So
does
this is, yeah,
yes,
a good example here is that if you, yeah, each of those files each of the artifacts that are created, it should be the case that each of them come with their own checksum. So there's a particular tool that's used to build Meshery CTL. It's called Go Releaser. And that Go Releaser, that tool, is invoked as part of the workflow. So just to familiarize everyone, the workflows, the GitHub actions and the workflows, everyone here, you should be able to, you should see an actions here and be able to get a view over, you know, the processes that are running, the workflows that are running. To see the actual the jobs themselves and the steps that they go through under .github workflows, these are the individual workflows that they each have their own trigger. They each get triggered based on different you know, events. But I bring this up because in the workflows that build out the Go code, like this one of the steps that it has, it builds a server. It may run some tests for the server. It may build the backend. It does a lot of things, right? But one of the things that it would do is we should find a reference to Go Releaser. So Go Releaser is the utility that we use to create Meshery CTL. The configuration for Go Releaser is in the root directory here under Go Releaser. So this utility, it has its own configuration, and we're saying we want you to try to build against these architectures, or rather these architectures for these operating systems. And so this affects only the command line client. As part of that, what this tool does, it generates a checksum, and that is deposited along with the rest of the artifacts. These checksums are only for Meshery CTL. Every time that a release is made, or every time that a build occurs and a release is made, Docker images are also created. Those Docker images, so the Docker images are built, and depending upon which workflow is invoked, they may be pushed out to Docker Hub. And let's see, so this build for optimizing images, it was done. A build was done. It was Docker images were created, checksums are made, and you'd go to, I think, Docker Hub to look at those checksums. So cool. So like it's more.
yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Understood what does it mean technically? It's like a file that creates file, invokes file. So we have to touch the framework, the Go releaser to make a different result. If you want.
For Meshery CTL, yeah, Go Releaser for Meshery CTL.
Yes. Okay.
If
it's
you
fine
want,
for now. At least we have a single file, but maybe when we release small fixes, like urgent fixes daily, nightly, or in other words, maybe we can make separate single checksums. I thought that maybe fast updates for fast updates, security fixes.
Sure. Yep. That makes sense. So then to take people kind of through the rest of the build and release strategy, like I'll just touch on some high level things, which is there's any number of artifacts to come out. Use GitHub Actions and workflows. The 5 or so workflows that we were just sort of looking at, they get kicked off based on different events, different triggers. So this is actually an area of need. So right now, if you go let's just pick the documentation build. So the workflow that kicks off when there's an update to docs. Well, what triggers this workflow? Well, it's actually right here. It's these lines. This is the name of the workflow itself, but it triggers on, or the event that causes it to start is when there's a git push, and that push includes changes to files underneath docs. Also, when that is done against the master branch, when any of these things match, then it will go and do a Jekyll build to create the docs site. So just by way of introduction to like the fact that they're triggers. Okay, I'll try to do this even faster, which is there's a lot of workflows. We do automated builds. They get triggered. You build container images. We push them out. You have to label your container images. So we do. We tag them. There's a few tags that we end up using. We use tags to assign a version number. Like, hey, what release was that? Well, you can look at the Docker tag and it'll tell you it was version 0.427. Well, that's great. That's very helpful for figuring out if you want to pin to a particular version, you can just run just that one. As part of that, turns out you can create a lot of Docker tags. And in using those, we essentially use Docker tags to create release channels. So Meshery itself and each of the components, each of the adapters and the clients have 2 release channels. And that's because in part what Mert was just saying, he was going to use the word nightly, like, hey, how often do builds happen? Well, how often do they happen? They happen as and when an event triggers them. So they don't kick off on a schedule at all. There's no nightly because someone could be doing a contribution at any hour. And so it's as and when a push happens or a merge happens or a release, what any one of those events happens. Now we want to continually be running builds and making sure that things are working and functioning, and continually be running tests and verifying. And we want to get that code into people's hands early and quickly. And so there have been these 2 release channels created to facilitate that. There's the stable channel, which I bet you all can guess the purpose of that stable channel is like, that things are well baked, the bugs have been mostly worked through. That's the goal anyway. We're maturing as a community toward that. And then the edge channel, which is the other one, which is the Wild West. In part, these 2 channels are established through, part of how they're differentiated and how they're established is through Docker tags. So I was saying before, like basically all of the artifacts that the project produces, almost all of them come out as a Docker image, other than Meshery CTL, and it's a binary. And so we can use Docker tags to identify and clarify between 2 channels. There's a stable channel, edge channel. So every time, and the code is pushed to the stable channel, or artifacts are pushed to that stable channel when a release is made, when a tagged release is made, when a human goes in and says, oh, you know what, it's actually time, we're good, it's time to make a release to the stable channel. And I'll take you through what that process looks like in a minute, but so that's a manual thing, like, hey, someone has said we're comfortable, let's release it. The edge channel and how new releases go into the edge channel, that works differently. It's a little more willy-nilly. It's not willy-nilly in so much as it's just a lot faster. So in the edge channel, anytime that a pull request is merged to the master branch, this is true for all the repos. Like anytime that a PR is merged to the master branch for that repo, an edge release is made, which is to say that in a pull request, we're executing workflows, we're doing builds, we're doing feature integration tests, artifacts are produced, like the code is compiled and images are created. Well, if someone has said, yep, that's a good contribution, let's merge it, well, those artifacts will then be like pushed to Docker Hub, and they'll be tagged with Edge latest. So the last merge to master, that's the latest Edge release. Edge is right on the edge of, and so that's very helpful to getting things into people's hands quickly. When a user downloads and runs Meshery, by default, they will be subscribed to the stable channel, just because that makes sense. Now, I say subscribed because part of the behavior of the project itself is that, and let me share the rest of my screen here, maybe. By the way, while I'm doing this, I'll pause because one, I'm talking the whole time, which is bad. We're on a path to like getting Lee to shut up. Two, people might have questions, or people might already know this and we don't need to talk about it. Users are empowered to basically switch between channels. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So if I'm here, just on my system, I can interface with Meshery CTL, and I can do a few things. I can say, hey, Meshery CTL, like, what version of things are running? Well, immediately, very quickly, it's going to respond with its own versions. It's going to say, well, I know, like, that's built into my binary. When I was created, I got assigned my version number. I know what that is. I'll just tell you right away. And here's my Git SHA, my reference for like when this tag was made inside of Git and where you can go find the exact reference. It will then say, okay, well, I'm a command line client purpose built for interfacing with Meshery server. So if there's a Meshery server available, I'm going to try to go ask it, hey, what version are you? Because even though these things are packaged and released at the same time, they get installed separately. And as such, their upgrade path isn't necessarily married. Like Meshery client and server, you could be running different versions and they generally will work. There are various points in time where they might not work. So part of what we do here is if someone is being diligent enough to look at this, not only will Meshery CTL reach out to Meshery server and ask it what version it's running, it will also reach out to GitHub and say, hey, what's the latest stable release? What's the latest release, stable release? Turns out that this is the latest release. So we're good. If they weren't running that, it will prompt them and say, hey, do you want to, maybe you should upgrade, maybe you should. So so that's good. But the thing that we were just talking about was the fact that there are like these channels. By default, when you install Meshery, you're subscribed to the stable channel. And by subscribed, I mean that we really want to, facilitate and encourage users to get the latest releases into their hands as quick as possible. And so I'm running Meshery locally as a set of Docker containers. The Docker tag that I'm using and that I'm running, that tag is stable-latest. So my Docker images, let's just look at what those are. Let's look at what we're running. So Meshery CTL system status. Oh, I guess I'm not. Oh, yeah, I'm not running Meshery, or not there anyway. Anyway, you can assign different tags, and so when a new image is pushed and stable latest is moved to a new image, well, you can, if you can run a system update, and you'll go out and you'll get the latest images pulled. And every time that you start Meshery, it does an update. It does a Docker pull so that you're subscribed to that channel. You're always getting the latest from that channel. Cool, good. So we empower users with the ability to like switch from edge to stable or stable to edge. And some of this is undergoing some change right now. There's a couple of contributors working on that. But okay, so there are release channels, there's release processes. There's a lot of considerations about things that are done. A lot of things to do. So with that, I'll pause and say, hopefully what questions do people have? Like, there's some specific things to talk about that I think that might be of interest to folks, and people might want to pick up and do. And I know Rodolfo's got kind of a broad and wide sort of agenda around integration testing and all of what that entails. So good. So, okay, let me, nice. Okay, good. Now, so Alonso was kind enough to chime in saying, hey, look, hey, I didn't blow his mind, or like he got it, which is great. That actually brings, just thinking of Alonso, I start to think about some of the good work that he's done around transcription of our Meshery docs into Spanish, which has me thinking about how docs relate to builds. Well, okay, there's kind of an interesting thing that happens in the build process, and it's not documented right here. So I'm gonna go back to our notes. I'm gonna go ahead and it is documented in this other doc just because more effort was given to this recently. So I'm gonna pull this open. There, every time that a release is made, there is one of the workflows is a small utility will run. One of the GitHub actions is called Release Drafter, and it does exactly what its name sounds like, which is it helps take it's basically, it automatically creates a change log and says like, hey, since last time that you made a release, here's all of the PRs that have been merged. Here's all the issues that have been closed. And so the GitHub action that we use, it's called Release Drafter. And to see what it does in action, all of you, any of us, well, can go to the releases area. The latest release that you will see is 427. And right here, starting from here on down, this was all auto-generated by Release Drafter, by that GitHub action. There's a little bit of intelligence built into it so that it will create these categories, these sections. If it sees that a PR has been merged from the user dependabot, then it will just say, oh, that's categorized as maintenance. I'll put a link to all that under maintenance. If it sees something as carrying the issue label docs, technically it's area/docs, but docs, it'll then categorize it and put it under docs. And so great. So actually, if you look at the draft, what it has drafted, it's been about a month since we made a release. We've had all kinds of kind contributors doing things, and they've done lots of docs. They've done lots of dependabot stuff that pains me so bad. And then got some features, and we've got some basically uncategorized things, a bunch of general things that have been done. And so like it's actually time to make a release. It's been about a month. We kind of need to get there. But the reason that I totally digressed into this was to say, Alonso reminded me that in the past, it had been the case that we've had a certain, we have these auto-generated release notes, and Release Drafter is helping us. Well, that's good. And people can come here and look through this. That helps. but it wasn't the end game, or wasn't quite where we wanted to all get to. We wanted to also, as people go out to Meshery and they're like, hey, what's going on? What is this tool? Should I use it? How, are people working on it? What's the latest, etc. What release am I? Is that we were missing the automation of the step that would go from literal markdown here to markdown over here. And a contributor that had joined the community, Sidan, he had helped in this area, so he's helped automate this. So you can see his I'll show you the workflow, but the automation is to just take the output of those draft notes and paste them into the documentation here. And so, yep, that's part of what goes on in terms of like auto-generating release notes. So release drafter has a role in that. And then there's part of that whole action is that will then take and it will auto document to the docs. So that's good. So who's got, yeah, I mean, there's a year's worth of stuff to talk about. But I know we've got some things that I know I've got some things that I'd like to see accomplished, but Rodolfo is, Rodolfo, do you want to just, so if someone doesn't say something, I'm gonna keep talking. If people are interested in an area, please signal. If you think we should be doing something differently, please signal. Else, Rodolfo's likely to come knocking on your door saying, hey, what are you doing? Are you busy? I've got something for you.
Right.
The one thing that had really intrigued me recently, and I'm really tickled that this is possible, is Rodolfo has been sort of just at the start of having Kubernetes clusters provisioned in the build environment in GitHub Workflow, and then doing end-to-end testing of deploying Meshery, deploying adapters, starting to get into deploy a mesh, starting to and that's a super interesting thing to me. Very helpful to the project, very helpful to releasing with high confidence, high quality. Rodolfo, I know there was an item in here that is a number of things that we're trying to do is articulate a few goals, orient everyone, articulate some few goals. One of those is, this like, this is, do you want to speak to this note?
Yeah, that suggestion is to not request peer review or not merge pull requests if the tests have not passed. This is because if we merge some changes that are failing the test, later on it's difficult to identify the bug in order to fix that. So the main mission or the main goal of this is to have master always passing the test. If we have master always in green, it will help to deploy and to contribute faster. So this is a suggestion to always have green in test.
So good, because I know for my part, I could talk about this for another couple hours, explaining how all this stuff works. We won't do that. Instead, I'll do this. I'll say, Raphael, it's been a little while since I've seen you. Very nice to see you again. I was very encouraged by some of the questions you had asked a while ago. Anything intrigue you? Anything you think maybe we should do better? Things that you'd like to learn? Things that you've seen done elsewhere that maybe we should consider? Feedback.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, I basically this year, okay, I look forward to being part of the committer as well as a part of the developers team for Meshery. I would like to work on the plugins as well as the adapter I can offer in terms of my experience in building around Meshery adapters. So that's the core aspect I really would like to be involved at this year. I'm happy going through in terms of the continuous integration pathway, as well as seeing what Cypress can do, as well as in terms of the workflow on GitHub. So that is it. But a core aspect in terms of the testing, I do believe that test cases, we need to improve on the numbers of test cases that are being written for the workflow. So that is my assumption and what I've noticed so far. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh yeah, totally, Raphael. That's fantastic. The one you're correct about the unit tests. Oof. Yeah, we're woefully the project overall woefully behind on unit tests. That's a great note. I'm making a note of it. And then I it's fantastic that you're signaling interest on Meshery adapters. It's a beautiful time to be involved with Meshery adapters. Utkarsh, who's on the call right now, is a great individual to have a chat with about the adapters. They have just undergone a re-architecture, and there's much more to do with them. It's great because the re-architecture puts them in a much better place where they can each of the adapters can go off and do some deep integrations with individual service meshes. So it's about to get super interesting. So a lot of you are absolutely welcome on all of the calls, and don't join any of them that interest you. Um, the one that where Meshery adapters get talked about even more is on Wednesday's Meshery dev call. There's generally some talk about adapters there, and then we will talk about them here because obviously they need continuous integration and releasing and all that. The community call gets some mention about them as well. So that's great, Raphael, and that's good. I'm glad that this project is on your New Year's resolution list. So good. Shubham, you had written down an item that we didn't get to.
Yeah, so whatever tests that we are doing, specifically the unit test and the overall test in every respective repository, we need to get an overview of how much of the code base has been covered by the tests so that in the near future we are able to improve on to the tests and we'll make sure that each and every component of the entire project is being tested. So there is this tool known as the code cov. It's like code coverage sort of thing. So what it does is it can generate we can have another workflow, the GitHub workflow with it. And according to all the statistics based on the tests, it basically generates a result. And it has a very nice dashboard, which will like give us okay, so let's say that there is this website project and it has an SRC folder. So inside SRC folder, let's say that there is this one entire page, you could say, that has been tested only like the 66% of the entire components that have been tested. So it gives a sort of a dashboard to us, which tells us that how much code is tested, how much is remaining. And the best part is also highlights the functions that haven't been hit by the tests. So it gives us a very descriptive and very, you could say, in a very fashioned manner as to what should be our next focus for writing new tests. And I think it can be beneficial for all the projects that we have under layer 5.
Does anyone have any comment on that, code cov?
I think it's a great idea to have code coverage because it's a measure that we can take in order to know how many tests are missing or how many tests we have. So it's a great idea, and maybe we can create an issue to implement that in different projects.
Right. So as far as I know that Rodolfo, like the Cypress tests that are being written for the front end, even that can be integrated with the code coverage. So like, because in particular pull request, every time that Cypress is being given, being tagged with that, it only gives us the probably the amount of tests that has been run on that particular PR. But attaching Cypress with CodeCob will basically generate a report and will also tell us that how many components are yet to be tested. So that is like for every project that needs to have unit testing, the most important component is to identify what parts are not being hit by the tests.
Sounds great. Yeah, we will add that on every pull request in order to have those data or that data.
And one of the amazing things of CodeCob that I've seen in some of the open source projects is that you could even set a threshold. Like one of the, I think one of the things that you said that not request a PR review or not to merge any PR if tests have not been passed yet. So there is this threshold of, so like every pull request that the people are making these days usually does not have any sort of test along with it. So what can be done in this CodeCov integration in the repository itself that we could set a threshold change value. So it's like if let's say that currently our entire repository is at 65 level test, right? And we could write a YAML file for it and we could set it to fine tune of let's say 0.5% increment. So if a person lands up a PR and their PR does not satisfy this criteria, it will defer the person to merge the PR as well as it will not allow any sort of you could say retagging and again tagging anyone and even merging the PR. So what it does is it basically works on that threshold and it does not allow the PR to be merged before we improve onto that beyond and above that threshold. So that will help us to like maintain a good quality of code.
Yeah, great idea. I think we can take a lot of advantages of that. When I create the GitHub issue, do you mind to start working on that? Shuban?
Sure, I'll be more than happy to do that.
Great, thanks.
Beautiful, beautiful. Who's got anything else? We're just a couple of minutes over.
So I mean that we have a technical meeting today, which is related with continuous integration and security. So, uh, so uh, if I look at the uh, code of conduct, which is maintained by foundation, I see that personal relationship issues like personal attacks, trolling, public or private harassment. But should can we add some technical details like coding standards or security standards? I mean that.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. It'll be, yep. The larger the project gets, the more important all of these things become. Actually, the reason that there aren't a bunch of unit tests and code coverage is a very clear reflection of the maturity of the project. Like, hey, nobody cares about whether or not there's unit tests if Meshery doesn't do something really interesting. I'll just like, if it's not doing something they really need, then all the other particulars, like actually in some respects, this entire meeting, like all of the continuous integration, all the things we're talking about is like, if it doesn't do something really functionally excellent or that's very helpful to me, then it could be as secure as it could have the best community. Like we've got a really great community actually. But if the projects don't do something well. So anyway, my point is yeah, those make a lot of intuitive sense. Well, the unit test, the code coverage, the security stuff, the code of conduct, etc. We just, for my part, as in when those things, I would, for my part, I would try to put in focus on them later. That I'm not suggesting that everyone else does. If people can advance those, great. Code of conduct is important to start with, like because you got to have a warm and welcoming community, and you can't have people, doing the wrong thing. So we do follow the CNCF's code of conduct. In terms of like coding conventions, yeah, those are some good things to. It's really difficult thing in general to be very warm and welcoming and encouraging, and also at the same time like slap someone with, oh, you didn't pass the unit test, so no, we're not going to take it. It's like a lot of times people don't come back. They don't like. It's like, well, or they didn't sign the DCO. They forgot to sign their commits. It's like, well, and they don't come back, and they don't. Or hey, you've got to start. We do test driven development. First, write out your unit test. Like, oh, geez, they don't like to be really candid. There's lots and lots and lots of folks in the community who have a hard enough time forking a repo and like pushing back to it. So yeah, we're in a state of flux in terms of like starting young and small and growing to a maturity level. So Mert, we'll get there, I guess.
Okay,
Anyway.
I understand the risk that if we put some details like technical tests, do that about continuous integration and security, that will make that will that make feel the people who are interested in our project and not to join. It will make not to join.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And having those written down and stuff, it's a good thing. Like, hey, do we, yep. Don't let any of those comments that I said stop you. I think that was more of an explanation as to why we're only so far along there. In terms of, yeah, so the one thing to like dig your heels into potentially is maybe trying to advance the project from CII passing to CII silver, just because there's a lot of security oriented things in there. So right now we're best practices passing
The first level.
Yeah, and there was a lot in there, and we do these things.
You showed me the details maybe 2 days ago.
And so as you continue to, as this is an area of interest to you, one area to like pour your energy into potentially is to take us from passing to silver, the next step. And what does that mean? Like, I think right here we currently have a question mark, and we would have to move this to. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's no problem. Yeah, like this needs to be done anyway. We need to define some governance. But yeah, this is a good thing to work on. Like, here's the code of conduct stuff. State the key roles, responsibilities. Yep, totally. A lot of this takes a while. Interestingly, for us to go into the CNCF, we could have gone in a long time ago, even without passing. Passing isn't even required to go into the CNCF. So some of these things we're just trying to do because we know that they're good to do.
Okay.
I just looked at the time and recognized we're about 10 minutes over. So, Rodolfo, did we miss anything? Or we?
I think that the things that we are missing, we can talk about those in the next meeting.
Nice, very good. All right, same time next week. Sounds like Shubhank will we'll make some progress on CodeCov. Michael Gefeller, sometime he goes by Michu. It's how you, I guess it's how you say Michael in Swedish, I think is his. He's interested in Code Cove. I think he had mentioned Code Cove specifically, I think a little while ago, and a real bright guy. I don't know if you guys know, he's actually writing a blog post right now, and it'll go up, and in there you'll come to understand that not only does he have a PhD, but he has a postdoc in chemical engineering. A bright guy, nice guy, one of the maintainers. So Shivank, I'd touch base with Michael just to garner some interest, support.
Sure. I mean, that sounds perfect.
Nice. Oh, nice to see you all. Rodolfo, thank you. It's successful. Got a lot of interested folks. This is nice.
Yeah, it is great that we have a lot of people interested in CI and test. So yeah, hope you see you all the next meeting that is in 2 weeks.
See you guys then. Thanks, Rodolfo.
See you. Bye.
Yes.
See you. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.